She had her hands on my daughter's throat. That image, burned into my memory forever, stopped time for a second. The air around the pool was still, but my pulse roared like a hurricane in my ears. My little girl, only 8, autistic and nonverbal, couldn't even cry out for help. Her lips were parting, gasping silently as Karen, the HOA board member who had harassed us for weeks, leaned in with her knuckles whitening around my daughter's neck. Chlorine stung my eyes as I bolted forward, heart slamming against my ribs. The sound of lawn sprinklers, kids splashing, and distant birds, all of it faded into one thing: survival. But not mine. Hers. Karen didn't know who I was. She didn't know my background or what I carried in my wallet. To her, I was just another single dad with a problem child who didn't belong in her perfect little gated paradise. But in exactly 3 minutes from that moment, everything changed. What she did know, too late, was that she had just committed assault on a federal agent's daughter. And the clock was already ticking. I had activated the emergency beacon embedded in my phone, a signal only certain people could trace. My fingers shook, but my mind was clear. The first time I used that code was overseas. The second was for my daughter. You won't believe what happened when the SWAT team rolled in. Sirens? No, it was silent, stealthy, like thunder waiting to strike. What Karen didn't know was that in 3 minutes, this peaceful suburban pool would look like a war zone. I had held back before, tried to keep peace, tried to play nice for my daughter's sake. But that day, that was the end of silence. What happened next shook the whole neighborhood and exposed everything they tried to hide. When we first moved into that neighborhood, I thought we'd found peace. After everything I'd been through, deployments, late nights running operations, the kind of classified missions that leave a mark on your soul, I just wanted a place where my daughter could be a kid. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. We found this picturesque gated community on the edge of town, where every lawn was the exact same shade of green and mailboxes gleamed like they'd just been polished for a real estate ad. I didn't care about the cookie-cutter houses or the artificial smiles at the block parties. I just wanted calm. For her. My daughter Mia is 8 years old. She's autistic, nonverbal, and one of the gentlest souls you'll ever meet. She doesn't scream or throw fits. Instead, she hums little tunes under her breath and flaps her hands when she's excited. Sometimes she stims by tapping the tips of her fingers together like she's catching butterflies. She's scared of loud noises, loves water, and smiles, with her entire face when she's near animals. Her world is quieter, more focused, more sacred than most people ever notice. And for the first time since she was born, I thought she'd have a backyard to run in without anyone watching her like she was strange. But I was wrong. The problem started small, as it always does in places like this. First, it was the notes. Folded slips of paper from the HOA slipped into my mailbox with passive-aggressive complaints. Your child splashes too loudly in the pool, or please be mindful of property rules about noise. Mia doesn't even speak, let alone shout. Then came the stares, especially from her. Karen Whitmore, president of the HOA, wearer of pastel cardigans and permanent scowls, the type of person who schedules an emergency meeting because someone's fence is an inch too high. She looked at Mia like she was a pest, something that didn't fit her curated landscape of perfection. She never spoke directly to her, only about her, as if my daughter were a nuisance rather than a child. I tried to be civil. I always do. I've learned the power of restraint, of diplomacy. Not from peace conferences, but from interrogations where one wrong word meant chaos. Karen didn't care. She watched us like a hawk. Anytime we walked to the pool or sat near the clubhouse, she'd appear, clipboard in hand, fake smile plastered on her face, asking if Mia was doing okay or reminding me that cell phones aren't allowed near the pool deck, while gesturing to my daughter's insulin pump, mistaking it for some rule-breaking gadget. I corrected her calmly each time, but her eyes always said what her mouth didn't. "You don't belong here." Still, I tried to ignore it. I've been trained to read danger in people, not just when they raise their voices, but when they hold them back. And Karen, she simmered. She was the type who didn't yell until she had power. The kind who waited until no one else was looking. I should have left. There were signs. One afternoon, Mia and I were at the neighborhood park. She was playing with pebbles in the corner, humming. Another mother walked by with her child. Karen, standing nearby, whispered just loud enough for me to hear. "That man shouldn't be letting her out in public like that. It's disturbing." My fists clenched, but I said nothing. For Mia. Always for Mia. I thought I could protect her with silence. I thought if I ignored the looks, the comments, the veiled threats, we'd be fine. I didn't want to bring my past into our future. I'd spent years in places where conflict was normal. I didn't want that life anymore. I wanted to be just a father, nothing more. But what happened that day by the pool changed everything. And no one, not even Karen, saw it coming. It didn't happen all at once. The tension built like a summer storm. Clear skies, sunshine, and then suddenly a crack of lightning you never saw coming. Karen's hostility toward Mia didn't explode in a single moment. It crept in slowly, buried beneath rules and regulations, delivered with a sugar-coated sneer that made it hard to call out directly. But I felt it. In every clipped word, every exaggerated complaint, every time she chose to direct her voice to the people around us instead of addressing me or my daughter like we were human. The first real confrontation came on a Saturday morning. The sun was beaming down on the community pool, shimmering across the surface like glass. Mia was having a good day. That alone was rare enough to make my heart light. She was standing at the edge of the water, giggling softly, flapping her hands, completely immersed in her own little world of joy. That's when Karen appeared. Like a heat-seeking missile in her wide-brimmed sun hat and matching robe. She marched up to the lifeguard first, whispering something with sharp eyes, darting toward us. I pretended not to notice. I've learned that the moment you respond to people like her, you give them what they want. Escalation. But it didn't stop there. Karen turned to me, smiled tightly, and said, "She's being very loud. Some people are trying to relax here." I looked at Mia, who hadn't spoken a word all morning, and then back at Karen. "She's not loud," I said evenly. "She's just happy." That's when she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Happy or not, there are rules. This is a shared space, and not everyone wants to listen to noises." The way she said noises made something deep inside me clench. It wasn't just about volume, it was about difference and discomfort, and she couldn't handle either. Later that week, it got worse. Mia and I had come down to the pool again. She loved the water. It calmed her. And I had, brought her medical bag, which included her glucose monitor and insulin pump. We were seated on a lounger when Karen came over, eyes fixed on the small screen of the monitor that beeped quietly every few minutes. "Phones aren't allowed near the pool deck," she said flatly, crossing her arms. "That's not a phone," I replied, already tired of the conversation before it began. "It's a medical device. For my daughter." She didn't flinch. "Well, it's distracting. You should keep that sort of thing out of sight. There are children here." There was a pause. I stood, towering over her. "She is a child," I said, "and she's my child. You don't get to decide what's appropriate for her medical needs." Karen didn't respond, just pursed her lips and walked off, muttering something about special treatment. I watched her go, the sun still shining down on the concrete like nothing had happened. But everything had happened, and she was getting bolder. Over the next few days, the whispers turned to reports. The HOA sent me an email about excessive disturbance near the pool. Someone had expressed concern over unusual behavior. They didn't name Karen, but I didn't need a signature to know where it came from. Another time, Mia reached for a pool toy and accidentally brushed Karen's chair. Karen yanked the float away and barked, "Keep her hands to herself." It wasn't even anger. It was disgust, like she was brushing off dirt. Mia didn't smile after that. That's the part that gutted me. She stopped flapping her hands. She stopped laughing near the pool. The water no longer made her face light up. It made her look around nervously, checking first for Karen's shadow before she dared to step in. Every time I caught her eyes darting toward the cabana where Karen usually sat, my stomach twisted. A child who didn't speak, didn't complain, didn't even understand cruelty in the way adults do. And somehow Karen had found a way to make her feel unwelcome. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. Because the day was coming. I could feel it, like pressure behind the eyes before a migraine, like a fuse lit just below the surface. Karen was slipping, more aggressive, more entitled, less cautious. And Mia, she was just trying to exist. That Saturday, Mia smiled at me one more time before stepping into the shallow end of the pool. It was small, soft, and fleeting. I didn't know then it would be the last time she'd smile at me for days. But I should have, because that was the day everything changed. That was the day the storm finally broke. It was just past 3 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of summer day that makes everything feel light and harmless. The pool shimmered under a cloudless sky, kids laughing, splashing, sunscreen lingering in the air. Mia was calm. More than that, she was glowing. She wore her favorite pink swimsuit, the one with faded mermaid scales, and had her little turtle toy clutched tight in her hand. She walked slowly along the shallow end of the pool, stepping carefully with her usual rhythm, humming quietly, a melody only she understood. Her arms flapped gently as she reached the edge, crouched, and began tapping the water with her fingertips. For the first time in days, she looked happy. I was sitting nearby, watching her, keeping my distance but staying close. I remember texting my sister something simple, just, "She's okay today." Because when you parent a child like Mia, peace is never assumed. It's a gift. I never got to send that text, because within seconds, the air changed. I heard the heels first, that sharp, purposeful clack across the concrete. Karen. She walked with the posture of a dictator in heels, chin up, shoulders tight, every step a declaration of territory. I looked up from my phone just in time to see her make a beeline for Mia. Not toward me, not toward a lifeguard, straight toward my daughter. Her voice came next, high-pitched and cutting, slicing through the humid afternoon. "Control that thing before I call the cops." Her finger jabbed toward Mia like she was pointing at a stray animal. "You think this is cute? Letting her flail and make noises like a lunatic around my grandkids?" I stood immediately, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the rest of what she said. But Mia heard it, or rather, felt it. She froze. Her hum stopped. Her hands trembled in midair. Karen was still walking toward her, yelling, wild-eyed now. I started moving fast. "Karen, back off!" I called out, my voice deeper, sharper than I'd used in years. She didn't stop. Then, before I could reach her, she did it. In one violent, sudden motion, Karen leaned down, grabbed Mia by both arms, and yanked her up. My daughter shrieked, not with sound, but with her body, a silent, terrified flail, as Karen shook her, shouting, "Answer me when I talk to you! What's wrong with you?" And then, with one hand, she clutched Mia's tiny neck. Everything slowed. I don't remember dropping my phone. I don't remember how my legs moved that fast. All I remember is the sickening sight of Karen's fingers digging into the soft skin of my daughter's throat while her feet barely touched the concrete. I tackled Karen with every ounce of force I had stored from years of restraint. We both hit the ground hard, her shrieking, me roaring. I didn't touch her again. I didn't have to. I pulled Mia into my arms, who was shaking violently, tears welling in her wide, wordless eyes. Karen scrambled back, gasping, her robe twisted around her legs. "You assaulted me!" she cried. "You're finished, you freak!" My voice was ice, calm, lethal. "You just choked a disabled child in public." I turned to the lifeguard, who stood frozen. "Did you see that?" I barked. She nodded slowly, stunned. That's when I reached into my bag and pulled out the device I hadn't used in years. It looked like a phone, but it wasn't. It had one button, a red one. I held it down, 2 seconds, then 3. The signal was sent. No need to explain. No need to dial 911. This wasn't their job anymore. It was mine. Karen was still screaming. "You people are ruining this neighborhood. You think you're special because your kid's broken? I'll call the board. I'll call the police." "You don't need to," I said, rising to my full height. "They're already coming, but not the ones you think." She stared at me, eyes narrowing. What did you do?" "I gave you every chance to be human," I said. "You didn't just cross the line today, Karen. You burned it." 3 minutes passed. Then they arrived. Not with sirens, not with flashing lights. It started with the buzz of a black SUV crawling up the drive, then another and another. Neighbors peeked through blinds. The lifeguard stood behind me now, holding a towel to Mia's shoulders. The SWAT officers stepped out in silent sequence, dressed in dark gear, eyes scanning. One of them nodded at me. "Agent confirmed?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Target is the woman in the white robe." Karen backed up, stammering. What is this? I'm the HOA president. You can't just—" "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, his voice low, commanding. "You are being detained on suspicion of felony assault against a disabled minor. Remain still." She shrieked then, hands waving. "You can't do this. I'm respected here. I have rights." I walked over, stood inches from her. "You had choices. You chose violence." As they cuffed her, Mia clung to my leg, her small fingers wrapped tightly around my pants. I looked down and saw her face. Pale, confused, eyes darting from me to the men in gear. I knelt down, held her cheek gently. "It's okay now. You're safe. No one's going to hurt you again." Karen was still screaming as they led her away, her voice echoing down the street that once felt like home. The neighborhood watched in silence, mouths open, lawn chairs still, barbecue smoke rising like a fog over broken peace, and just like that, the illusion shattered. This wasn't just a personal incident, it was a reckoning. It exposed everything. Fake behind the flowers and fences, behind the homeowner meetings and the matching doormats. Behind every glare and forced smile, Karen thought she had power. She thought she owned the rules. But the moment she laid hands on my daughter, she lost everything. Because this wasn't just about my child. It was about every child who'd been shushed, every parent who'd stayed silent, every neighbor who'd looked the other way. That day, we stopped looking away. And I stopped holding back. 3 minutes. That's all it took, but in the moment, it felt like the entire world held its breath. I could feel the timer ticking in my chest, a practiced rhythm I hadn't relied on in years. Not since the last time I'd called in a field alert. I knew what would come next. I'd trained for it. But this time, it wasn't some foreign outpost or compromised extraction. It was a suburban pool deck, and the target wasn't an insurgent. It was a woman in a white robe with HOA clout and a clipboard full of vendettas. And she had just laid hands on my daughter. Karen was still pacing in circles by the cabana, ranting loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. "This is harassment." He tackled me. "That girl's a menace, a danger to the community." Her voice cracked with a mix of rage and desperation. I said nothing. just stood there beside Mia, wrapping her gently in a towel, brushing her damp hair, back as her body trembled from shock. I held her like I used to during storms, when thunder scared her and she needed to feel my heartbeat to calm hers. The first sign was a black SUV rolling in, slow and silent, not even a screech of tires. No sirens, no fuss, just smooth, coordinated arrival. Then another, then a third, each vehicle parked at precise angles, blocking the entrance and exit to the clubhouse cul-de-sac like a scene from a high-stakes op. Doors opened, and men in tactical gear stepped out. No shouting, no pointing, just quiet authority radiating from their every movement. My neighbors started to gather behind their hedges and porch columns, phones raised, eyes wide. Whispers grew louder. "What's going on? Is this a raid? Who called the SWAT team?" Karen froze when she saw them. Her voice faltered, mid-rant. "Wait, what is this? What the hell is this?" Her fingers gripped her robe as if it were armor, as if status would shield her from consequence. I stood as the lead agent approached, tall, steady, with a badge clipped to his vest and no emotion in his voice. "ID confirmed," he said, nodding once to me. "Proceed?" "Proceed," I answered. He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, step away from the child." Karen blinked like a deer caught in high beams. "Excuse me? Who do you think you are? You can't just come in here. This is my community. I'm the HOA president." "You're also under investigation," he replied, "for felony assault against a minor with disabilities committed on restricted federal property." He motioned toward the pool sign behind her, a detail she'd never noticed, but I had. The property was co-managed by a federal housing grant, a technicality most ignored. But not today. Karen's face collapsed in real time. "That's ridiculous. This is a misunderstanding. She was making noise, weird noise, and flailing. I was just trying to control the situation. You're going to believe him over me?" The agent didn't answer her. Instead, he gestured to two officers who stepped forward. "Place her in custody." "No. No! Get your hands off me!" she shrieked, jerking away. "I didn't do anything wrong. She was just making noise. She scared my grandchildren." I stepped forward then, calm and clear. "No, Karen. What you did was choke a child who can't speak. You assaulted her. You treated her like she wasn't even human. And now, you're facing the consequences." The neighbors had gone silent. Even the lifeguard who had earlier looked too stunned to move was filming now, her eyes locked on the unfolding scene. Karen's hands were yanked behind her back as zip ties clicked tight. She squirmed, flailed, tried to spin the story. "He attacked me. I'm the victim here." The lead officer turned back to me. "You have visual or witness confirmation?" "Multiple," I said, glancing at the lifeguard and pointing to the pool's security camera near the gate. "And full audio, everything she said, everything she did." Karen heard that part. Her jaw slackened. "Wait, you set me up?" "No," I said. "I gave you chances. You ignored them." I stayed silent. "You escalated. I gave you room to walk away. You ran toward violence." She was breathing fast now, panicked, mascara smudging under her eyes. "You're not even a cop. You can't call in a SWAT team." I stepped closer, pulled my wallet from my back pocket, and flipped it open. Not a badge, not the kind she was expecting, but a federal operations card. "You're right. I'm not a cop," I said, locking eyes with her. "I'm a federal field agent, and I activated an emergency protocol for the protection of a minor with national security clearance, because that's my daughter you laid hands on." Her knees buckled. For a second, I thought she'd collapse. One of the agents held her steady before she could fall face first into the pavement. Mia, still holding my hand, looked up. She wasn't crying anymore, just watching, eyes glassy but alert. I crouched beside her again. "It's over," I whispered. "No more hiding, no more fear." Karen was escorted to the SUV, her cries now quieter, more broken. The neighbors watched, in total silence. A few stepped forward, offering murmured apologies, uneasy glances, unsure if they were witnesses, accomplices, or cowards. But it didn't matter anymore, because justice, though late, had finally arrived, not with chaos, but with calm certainty. The kind of justice that doesn't shout. It shows up. And that day, it showed up for my daughter. The days that followed felt like waking up inside a new version of the same house. The walls were the same, the streets still lined with manicured lawns and trimmed hedges, but the silence was different. It wasn't the peaceful kind anymore. It was cautious, heavy. A silence filled with eyes watching through blinds, unsure of what they had witnessed. Or perhaps ashamed they hadn't done more. Karen was gone, taken away that afternoon, charged with felony assault on a disabled minor, resisting arrest and interfering with a federal investigation. She made bail within 48 hours, of course. People like her always do. But a court order prohibited her from returning to the neighborhood, let alone coming within 500 feet of my daughter. A restraining order was filed and granted without objection. She didn't even show up to the hearing. I think she knew she'd already lost the war she started, but the legal part was just one side of the aftermath. The real wound, the one that kept me up at night, wasn't Karen's yelling or even the bruises left behind on Mia's tiny neck. It was the quiet that came after. My daughter, who had once flapped her hands at butterflies and giggled at ripples in the pool, no longer wanted to go outside, not even to the backyard. She clung to me in ways she hadn't since she was a toddler. She'd wake up from shallow sleep, trembling, heart pounding, clutching her blanket like it might vanish. The therapists called it a trauma response, said it might take months to rebuild the trust she had lost in the world around her. But what hurt most wasn't what Mia did or didn't say. It was the question she couldn't ask, the one I saw in her eyes every time I tucked her in at night. Why did that woman hurt me? And the worst part? I had no answer that would make sense in a world that had already failed her once. Still, we tried to heal. I took time off. We started daily routines to reestablish safety. Soft lights, comfort toys, familiar music. I found a new therapist who specialized in trauma and nonverbal children. Slowly, Mia began to respond again. She smiled once while watching a cartoon. A week later, she tapped the surface of her bathwater. Small things. But after what she'd endured, they felt like miracles. The community itself split in two. Some neighbors came forward, sheepishly, cautiously, saying they had always felt something was off about Karen. One mother brought over cookies and said she was so sorry for never speaking up. A retired couple from down the street told me Karen had once yelled at their grandson for being too wiggly near the community garden, a pattern hidden in plain sight. But others remained quiet, or worse, resentful. I heard whispers that I had overreacted, that I'd ruined someone's life over a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. As if hands around a child's throat could be debated. It was during one of those long, restless nights that I realized I couldn't just move on. Not this time. Not after what Mia had been through. So I began compiling evidence, not just for our case, but for every ignored complaint Karen had ever dismissed, every family she'd alienated, every rule she'd used as a weapon. I tracked down parents whose kids had been shamed at HOA meetings, seniors who'd been threatened with fines for feeding birds, even one man who told me Karen once accused his autistic nephew of disturbing the peace during a barbecue. Together, we presented our findings to the remaining HOA board. I walked in, not as a father or an agent, but as a neighbor who refused to let silence reign again. We demanded new policies, inclusion training for board members, sensory-friendly pool hours, a neighborhood watch specifically trained in de-escalation, and clear disciplinary action for any member caught harassing children or families with special needs. To my surprise, most of them agreed, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps fear, or maybe, finally, understanding. A month later, a new sign was posted outside the pool gates, the same spot where Mia had once stood, flapping her hands in pure joy. It read, "This is an inclusive, neurodiverse-friendly zone. All children are welcome. All families are safe here." It wasn't much, just a sign. But it was a beginning. Mia still hasn't asked what happened that day. And maybe she never will. Maybe her mind will tuck it away, out of reach, as it often does. But I know it'll live somewhere inside her. A bruise in her memory, a shadow in her trust. Still, I also know this. She's not alone anymore. The community, flawed as it is, changed because of her, because of what she endured, because her silence screamed louder than anyone ever expected. And as for me, I'll never be silent again. What happened that day wasn't just about Karen. It wasn't just about one hateful woman crossing a line. It was about something much bigger, about every overlooked child in every silent neighborhood. It was about the systems that pretend to protect but instead exclude. It was about the quiet kids who get stared at in parks, the disabled children told to behave because their joy makes someone uncomfortable, the families who are forced to shrink themselves just to survive one more day without conflict. My daughter couldn't scream that day, but her silence told a truth this neighborhood had ignored for too long. And when one child suffers in silence, every parent has a responsibility to speak louder. That's what this story is. Not a headline, not a drama, but a call to wake up. If you have a child like mine, sensitive, nonverbal, differently wired, don't wait for things to get better on their own. Don't stay quiet just to keep the peace. Be their shield. Be their advocate. Be the noise that justice needs. To everyone watching this, if you've ever seen injustice and turned away because it was uncomfortable, I hope you'll think twice next time. And if you have stood up, if you've fought for the voiceless, for the misunderstood, then you're part of the change we desperately need. We built this channel, HOA Karen, to shine light on those silent battles and to give a voice to stories that rarely get told. So subscribe if you believe in protecting those who can't always protect themselves. Share this video so someone else doesn't stay silent when they see abuse. And leave a comment. Tell us your story, your fight, your win. Let's make sure that what happened to Mia never happens to another child again, because silence protects the abuser. But voices? They protect the innocent.